Services Committee to order. Thank you for coming out on Groundhog's Day. I might make this meeting a little extra short. On my way here, my daughter called me and she was in tears, and she was driving her car home from Bloomington and she thinks she was in labor.
Oh, yes.
I think
Yeah.
the phone
I said,
rings.
oh no, and I meant, oh yes. Sorry about that. That's right.
I think I might, if I get a phone call here, Bob is right here, so
Way to
we'll
be.
go from there. All right, did you call the roll, Chuck?
Bill Flux.
Yes.
Bob Young.
Yes.
James Curley.
Here.
Justin Gimbel. Darrell Holt. Paul Ritter.
Here.
Bill Peterson. Here.
Okay, how about the agenda?
I'll approve the agenda.
Make a motions, motion made and seconded, all in favor?
All right.
The minutes are in there for the January 5th meeting. They look pretty complete to me. Somebody wanted to make...
Accept the minutes.
Okay, thanks. Jim? Second. Bill? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The ETSB, I just got an update from Jim Wolford, and he says, the main things are Dwight is still a work in progress with Motorola. The Spillman training, the computer training, continues with all the law enforcement officers in the county. And we're working on technology issues like getting all agencies on the VPN. And don't ask, because I don't remember what VPN is.
Yeah, voice protocol.
That's probably it. The biggest issue that we have, we'll be having, a board member will have to resign. The Streeter coming on board, they want a seat at the table on the ETSB board, and we already have the maximum number as per the rules. So somebody's gonna have to go off, and I think Marty Fannin has already spoke to him about that as far as board members going off. So they did put out an email asking for someone to resign. I don't know how that came about. And that's pretty much what he had to say. I would comment that for the last 2 months, they've not had a quorum at their meetings, and it makes it difficult to get some stuff done when not enough people show up to pay the bills or make some necessary approvals. Okay, we're down to 2B, review a consideration for extending the moratorium, delaying the process, or acting upon special use applications for wind energy conversion systems. At our ad hoc meeting last Thursday night, I believe it was, we pretty much had agreement that we wished to extend the moratorium. We're going to look for a motion here tonight, and we talked about various time frames on that. Why don't we get a motion and a second on the floor for that, and then have a discussion about it? Does that sound like a good way to go?
Sure.
I make a motion to extend the moratorium 230 days.
Second.
Okay, a motion made and seconded to extend the moratorium for an additional 230 days. Before we vote on that, any discussion among the board members about that?
What's
You
the
weren't here.
significance of 230 petition?
To November 30th, which is the last day of your training meeting as county board as you sit today.
Okay.
And if we put the question to the voters in November, that's when we'd have the information back and we could act on the information based on the vote. If we get permission to do that, that we could go through at that time.
We still haven't heard from this.
We still haven't heard from the Attorney General. Chuck, present him with some new information about this, or
Just that I did yesterday, was contacted by EDF, which is the company that's doing the K-Farm, said the K4 wind farm, which was the K4 wind farm in Kankakee, Fort Iroquois, and Livingston County. And they still do have an interest in Livingston County. They'd probably be building out in 2018, so they're looking for a permit in 2017. So they do have an interest in making sure that we go through this progress and move forward with regulations, so they know what regulations they have to work with.
Sure.
I think if you can all comment on this, we still need to get our, the things that the ad hoc committee has talked about, we need to get those nailed down. And we need to get nailed down what happens if this referendum, if the question we put on the ballot, if these townships went out, okay, they're gonna be out, and if these townships went in, they're gonna be in. And have all that spelled out ahead of time, before November, so that it just be a pretty simple thing, I hope, after the vote, to have everything in place. In other words, this would go through the zoning board of appeals and everything prior to that time. Chuck, you want to add anything there?
No, I think this is kind of the point, is that, we need to start working through it and look at all the options and maybe have different scenarios that are on the board, so that once you get to the point of making decisions, those scenarios have been discussed and gone through the public hearing process, and they're ready for action once we get to November. And we may need the entire 200, well, as it said at the ad hoc committee meeting, is that in order for all these things to make work, it's basically you have to have decisions made at the August County Board meeting as far as language is concerned to move forward, for referendums to move forward and so forth. So the window of getting things done is now down to a 6-month window to start drafting things and approving drafts and going through that. So, and that 6 months seems to go past them rapidly sometimes, so it's time to work on that at this point in time.
Also, by putting that date out there, no company would be able to file, of course, between, well, now. The present moratorium expires on April 15th, I believe, right?
Correct.
And this one would extend it out so that nobody could file in that time period. Go ahead.
We talked Thursday about if we didn't hear back from the Attorney General by a certain month, that we'd go ahead and write out, or have Seth write out, a referendum. What was that date, and is that?
It wasn't set. We just thought that we ought to set a date at some point and say, if we don't hear from them.
Because not only do we have the process of the county to go through, then you have to go through getting it on the ballot, and there's a deadline for that.
That's
as
the
well.
It's August 22nd, so the county board has to act on it in August. That's what I said earlier.
Okay.
And we talked to legal about, I know, because if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Tom that was worried that we were pushing the boundaries on this last extension. Have we talked to legal about another 230 days? And
Well, actually, Seth did talk about that, I think, on last Thursday, and he thought that as long as we were working towards getting our ordinance in order, and we're waiting for the results of this
From the Attorney General.
from the Attorney General and the election, that we're probably okay.
Okay.
Is that the way everybody else remembers that?
Yes.
Forward progress.
Yes.
Okay, are you ready for the vote on that? Let's repeat back the motion so that,
Bill basically made a motion, Bob. Bill didn't bother me. Proposing that we extend the existing moratorium for 230 days. It'd be for extending for 230 days, then processing, acting upon any special use applications for the construction operation of any wind energy conversion system or works filed after the date of that ordinance adopted, et cetera, et cetera. And it's had the same language as we had before, as far as recognizing that we had the Pleasant Ridge application filed. So it's any applications filed with the county board prior to January 15th of 2015. So.
anybody will allow any public comment before we vote? Is that, anybody have anything to say? Be a roll, go ahead.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
This will be a roll call vote.
Bill Flack,
Yes.
Bob Young,
Yes.
James Curley,
Yes.
Paul Ritter,
Yes.
Bill Peterson. Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on. Chuck, do you have anything to update us on any other wind energy issues?
Just at this point in time, what I'm planning to do, making an assumption that the moratorium passes as it's proposed, is to take the existing language that we've discussed about in changing the wind energy regulations, trying to simplify the draft and taking all of the comments and everything out and just putting in newly proposed language. It'll still be in a draft form, still for discussion. Bring that back a month from now to this committee meeting and then discuss at the March committee meeting to do it at that point in time in order to move forward on it, so.
Okay. Solid waste report.
Have a copy of that in the packet that I handed out to you. Fairly common issues that are out there. The first page is addressing the Livingston landfill, which is basically just addressing some samplings of the private wells that did take place, and the results were similar to past ones. Then there's a couple of Clean Air Act report programs. One's a monthly one, one's a semi-annually one at the bottom of it. The only note that I noted at the bottom one of the semi-annual one is that there was more outages than had been in the past, and a lot of that has to do with them using more of the Hoosier system and flares going on and off more frequently, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also noting at the bottom one, the winter weather with the power outages played havoc on them too, and has through the winter. So if you do notice some more odor issues going out there, there was some instances where all their flares were down and turbines were down, so there was some more odor issues that were going on out there at that particular time. Everything's going well at this point in time as far as that goes. Some well issues, go down, third one down, the January 20th one. Again, they're looking at having an alternate procedure for well GW24. It does have a pinched casing 40 feet below ground, so they either need to replace that or do further testing to see it's being influenced by the other ones around it. Then you have the two January 21st ones were two groundwater reports. One had to do on the third quarter, one was on the fourth quarter for consistently observed increases and confirmed ones. They were dissolved chloride, nitrite, and solids, and then some boron issues and some specific conductance on the third quarter one. Confirmation ones on the fourth quarter one, they had all the same issues, but they added a pH issue that goes along with that. Again, these are all natural occurring issues, so there's no big surprises with them. They're not real big concerns at this point in time. Just one quick note on the Republic landfill. If you go past it, the rain in the winter has kind of played havoc on the open dirt and everything on it, so their erosion issues are there. They know they're gonna have to come in and repair them. They will do that. They do plan on putting some final cover on the west and south sides of Cell C, and then they'll have to do work on their active phase 2. So they are gonna be working on that. The second page is all the Streeter issues that goes along with that. The first one is we did get a copy of the IEPA correspondence to indicate that the Streeter landfill is now in compliance with the EPA regulations. They're never out of compliance. They had I think I mentioned to you before, they got a letter from an inspection from the EPA, and he had sent a series of things that he'd like to see corrected. And he would re-inspect it. They corrected those, he re-inspected it, and everything's fine. It's basically getting a lot of the erosion issues, they've gone in there and cleaned them up and addressed those. The second one was looking at Hall leachate at the Streeter landfill, and there were similar results to the past ones. And the last one had to deal with observed increases for groundwater monitoring for the fourth quarter. It was dissolved solids, sulfates, phenols, and specific conductants. So those are the issues that go along with that.
And what are those caused by?
The solids and the sulfate and specific conductants are just natural issues that go with the landfill. These are probably gonna go up and down. Phenols are something you see all frequently on them, and they're a major component, and fortunately, that's part of the waste that goes in there and comes out of them, so. It's really well, I mean, if you wanna see the results, I have them, but, you know, I do look at them just to make sure they're not organically out of proportion that goes along with them, so. You have host agreement information with you as far as the amounts coming in. This is a report that was for the December waste coming in, what we're paid in January. Again, it was at $340,434. This is fairly consistent with what they pay for this time of year, so that's not an unusual amount that comes in this particular time of year that goes moves forward. Questions, concerns, comments? Under 2016, they do plan on constructing their extra half of the cell that they were planning on doing, and they're seriously considering doing the leachate line that'll go from their leachate tank over to where the city sewer stops over by the old Atkinson farmhouse. So you have the leachate being piped into the city instead of trucked in. So they do plan on doing those along with the cover work. That's their major construction projects in 2016.
Might be of some interest to you, the energy company that takes the methane gas and converts it to electricity, and they sell it in southern Indiana to a co-op, and they have to deliver so much energy each day, continuous, to that co-op. If they can't do it, they have to pay the price of buying electricity on the market to replace that. So those couple of days in December 28th and 29th, when the landfill was down, that raises havoc with Hoosier Energy, because they can't run their turbines, the fans and so forth, the compressors, without some incoming electricity. So they weren't able to deliver electricity, so they had to buy it on the spot market to provide over there, and that causes them real heartburn. They like to have methane gas, and they like to be able to operate those turbines on a continuous basis. I asked them if they were interested in putting in a fifth turbine, and the landfill people said that they're using all the methane gas now, that there's not enough methane gas there at the current time to add a fifth turbine. So it's good that we're making use of that methane gas now. And prior to Hoosier Energy coming along for years, that was just burned off with an underground flare. So this is a much better use of energy, I think. Go ahead.
I have a couple questions about the well sampling, the private wells. How many were sampled roughly?
About 10.
About 10, and were all the levels lower than safe drinking water levels?
They were, yeah. I mean, they're very consistent with them. I mean, they're gonna come back and say, you know, it's high in sulfates and stuff like that, but that's more an odor issue than it is anything else that comes with it. And the one well north of the landfill over by Thrushman's, for some reason, always comes back high in fluorides. And nobody's figured out why, but it's done for years and years and years.
Do they test the Humane Society as well?
They have. It's not on their constant list to do it. They have certain wells that they do all the time, and they do one or two at different points in time. I know they had done the Humane Society, but I don't know the last time they did it. If Humane Society wants it done, let me know, they'll do it. We can do it, it's not a problem.
Do they, does somebody actually like certify that it's drinking water safe?
Yes,
Or do they just give you the levels and this is the levels?
it's compared to drinking water,
Don't they have to send it to the IEPA?
not that.
The sample?
No, but it's sent to a private lab, it's done by a private lab, and they compare it to that. I mean, if you know of anybody that has a problem out there, let us know, and we'll actually do a split sample with them. We'll have Grady Dean come down and we'll do a split sample.
How far out, I can get it out? Do they? that
Well,
what?
they go, I guess, well, Humane Society, and that's house along there would be probably the western edge of it. The northern would be the Thrushman's area, so that's about a mile in that direction. And Dave Wolf to the south, they go as far south as his house. I'm not sure how far east they go.
Is there a reason you asked that question? Is there something behind that question, or is it just curiosity?
Well, LCEA actually tested some of the private wells out that way like 10 years ago now. And the consultant's response was that they should be fine if they have filters. And, I mean, he just assumed people would have filters, and I was like, I wouldn't assume that. So I just wanted to see if someone was really looking at the drinking water levels as opposed to just the raw numbers. We haven't repeated that test. So, and one of the wells we tested was the Humane Society, so they might be interested because they had contacted us.
Back then, you mean?
LCEA, yeah, back then.
But
And
you
also
haven't had a
there's
dialogue
something-
with them since then?
No, we haven't done, you know, we do our river monitoring, so we haven't done private well monitoring, but one of the things that LCEA is talking about to the public is whether we can change that sampling plan to change that up a little bit and maybe do some sampling of wells and other things, rather than just the river. But that's just in talks at this point. The other thing is in the leachate, there was some semi-volatiles and volatile organic compounds for the quarter. So that was that's unusual. They don't usually have hits. Every once in a while they get on SBOC.
Those heads were really small, I mean.
But their argument for what, when they have an exceedance and they go through their process up to step 2, where they have to explain why the results are higher than the trigger point, they usually, what they do is they explain to the EPA that it's not them, because the chemicals being found in water are, I'm talking about the monitoring wells now, not the leachate. So it's the monitoring wells that trigger this. So when the monitoring wells have these issues, they always explain it by saying that it's man-made, that it's naturally occurring compounds, and therefore, and we're not finding the man-made one, so it can't be the landfill. So, they are not required to explain why the levels are going higher. They're not required to find a culprit. They're only required to prove that it's not them. And so far, the EPA has been accepting their argument that even though the levels have gone up over the years for some things, that it's not them. It's just naturally occurring, it's statistical variation and blah, blah, blah. But if if you're seeing it in the leachate, we're starting to get more hits there, then it's just to be aware of it. It's just it's something I just noticed, so it actually expanded our list a little to pick those up for this next go round of testing.
But the leachates, I mean, you pick them up in the
Leachate
leachate,
is
that's the nature of the beast too.
Yeah, that's leachate,
Yeah.
and so
They're
far, so
gonna
good.
be there, I mean,
So
it's
far,
not
so
gonna,
good.
that's not a surprise, just how much is in there.
How much is in there?
Okay, let's move on to our draft regulations for solar farms.
All they did is, after our last conversation, one of them was a definition, and they looked at about 10 more definitions, and I kind of came back to one I was at. So, I get that, what you have tonight is the changes in green, so there's 2 things I want to do tonight, is kind of look at the definition issue, number 1, and number 2, I did change, we had a question on page, I had the screening and I don't see it here.
Oh, the screening issue?
Page 2 at the top, number 7.
Up there, yeah, up there, okay. All I did is added a clause or a line, is that the screening become at the discretion of the board, the zoning board of appeals, and that's supposed to be or, not of, or the county board, since we're assuming this to be a county board decision on that. So the screening would not necessarily be there, It'd be discretion of that, and this is similar to what it is in the current zoning ordinances for junkyards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not mandatory, sometimes it's a discretion that goes with that, so it is a consistent way of using language in order to do that. The definition on page 1, I guess I'm still a little bit of a, I did change it around, and so it's not the primary use, but one of the primary uses, so you can actually use the first definition. The second one, just like I said, I looked at a lot of different ones, and I kind of piled it together and tried to make it as simple as possible. Just to try to cover all the areas. It's just an array of multiple solar collectors and ground-mounted graphs or poles that transmit solar energy and is the primary land use for the parcel in which it is located, utility scale. The one above kind of uses, makes it one of the primary uses, because in our discussion is that if for some reason the technology would allow for solar energy to be generated on a landfill, and there are multiple primary uses on that facility. So I went back to the first one and said, okay, it may not be the primary use. You may be able to use a waste piece of property, which may be used for something else, and use it differently. So I kind of change it to make it work that. I'm trying to be all-encompassing and make it as simple as possible to make it work at where I'm at. So that's my first issue, is changing those small areas we talked about the last time. The second one has to deal with making sure the committee is comfortable that we're moving forward with solar energy discussions and regulations before we formalize and bring back to you next month, or at least in the future, to do that.
Any thoughts? Anybody have any problems with it, or?
If we don't have anything like this document, could a solar farm come in tomorrow morning to your office with an application for a solar farm?
They could.
And then under what would they be operating that application under?
Yeah, I'd stick it under, I have a general special use that I'd probably stick it under, but it's not definitive as far as setback and everything else is concerned.
So this is something that we ought to do sooner than we ought to be acting on.
We've discussed it for years. I mean, there's interest and lack of interest now, possibly more interest, so it's probably better to act on it sooner than later at this point in time.
You know, we want to be ready for it, all thinking rather than react to it. Yeah. I'd rather be the driver. I'd rather be in the driver's seat. Okay, so let's keep going on.
I see no reason not to.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So tell us the next steps here.
We'll formalize it, make it into a draft, text amendment, so you can review it.
Does not exceed 30 feet high, does that have any issue to play with the landfill at all? Or does that, I mean, what's the 30 feet high? Is that just a arbitrary number?
I mean, I took it out of an existing ordinance, but it kind of moves into, if you're gonna build a house, you generally have a 30-foot limit on a house.
Huh.
30 or 35-foot limit on a house. So kind of keeping it the same height as structures.
Okay.
Outside of, or inside of.
So I better not build a house greater than 35 feet.
Get a variance. Be ready to pay taxes.
Yeah, no
I
good.
don't have it in front of me, but does it have a noise limit?
50 decibel.
I did, yeah. I did. I used it 50. I did, I could use it 50.
Yeah, that seems, it's kinda high.
I put a property line.
Yeah, that helps.
But imagine the transformers, right? So if you go behind my house where the substation is, you can hear a pretty hefty hum.
So it's kind of some of the same issues with the wind farms,
Pretty
in
hefty.
terms of figuring out what kind of sound it is and making sure that it's not gonna be disturbing anybody on their property.
Yeah, 50 is not that high. My office is probably higher than 50 right now.
I'm sure it is.
You're not trying to sleep there at night or anything.
Sometimes during the
Are
day.
those- what are the-
During the day he does, yes.
What are the limits, Paul, you know what the limits are on the installation by your house? I mean, are there legal limits on those?
I'm not sure that's a discussion right now, because I'm gonna tell you what, they're pretty hefty. I don't know what they are, but I'm glad that there are days the wind's blowing the other direction, so. I'm not, I
I'm
can't
only
even begin to
asking
expect,
because-
I can't even begin to speculate. I have no
Okay,
idea,
I
but it
just
must be
wondered
pretty
if-
hefty,
if,
because
you
it's
know,
pretty
if you
loud.
looked into it, because if there is a general noise limit, then we could determine whether that's, you know, cause you're a test case. So it's the
My-
test,
My students tell me
You are a
to test
case.
case too, so, what, so what is the regulation on the substation as far as
go
noise
ahead.
currently? Do we have that, I mean, do you have that?
It's a federal regulation. I do not have what it would be. That's regulated by, I think it's federal regulation.
Go to my friend Google.
John?
They still have to meet the IPCD limits unless they're exempted in the IPCD regulations.
They may be exempt. They may be, some of those federal regulations are exempt.
Yeah, electric,
Transmission is sometimes exempt.
Probably is.
But it may be there, but they're just different stuff.
They can do it.
Okay, so, tell us run through the whole procedure here for, getting this enacted.
We're gonna formalize it, make it a draft text amendment, bring it back for you, be like the moratorium we did tonight, say, okay, this is okay with us, and you formalize it to move forward to go through a hearing process before the planning commission, zoning board, and then comes back to you formally and goes to the county board, so it takes a few months. That's the process.
Does it have to be written in legalese? You have to have the whereases and all that stuff in there?
Somewhere that'll probably have to be done with motions, but right now we just have to do put it in text amendment.
Substation levels generally range in noise level between 60 and 80 decibels.
At what point, immediate adjacent?
This is from the book on electrical power substations, engineering, 3rd edition. I don't know.
Okay, any other issues to come before the committee? Anybody? Public comment? One more time.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Is there any other information, any other wind companies, expressing interest, moving around, or that you're aware of? Other than the ones mentioned tonight?
Iberdrola is always, their run project's always sitting out there, that's never really gone by, so.
And have they,
Still on-
been actively contacting you?
No, but it's still on the books, I can sit here and tell you it's not sitting, it's still sitting there, so.
Any others?
There's only two that I'm well aware of. You guys got any other projects ready for us?
Any board members know?
You'd be the first to know.
Rick and Meyer said they weren't gonna be applying this year.
What?
From Iberdrola, right, he was here on Thursday night. He had no problem with the moratorium, nothing pressing with him.
We make a motion to approve the bills.
We got some bills.
Yeah, we got
Oh, yeah,
bills.
okay, Deegan's bill at the end, huh?
It's less than 55 decibels according to governmental regulations.
$1,560.
1,000.
You made the motion? Yep. You second? Motion been made and second to pay the bills. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
I don't know. I'm just reading the book.
is it time for that magic motion?
I'll make it.
Okay. Second? Jim Carlin? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you for coming. Glad that the groundhog didn't see a shadow this morning.